do you suppose skin lightening is so frustrating to deal with? Say it. There's so many different reasons, absolutely. And why would there be so many different reasons? Why is it so difficult? Because when the body wants to pigment, it's going to pigment. Pigmentation is part of the stress response. That's the most important thing to understand about pigment. It's part of the stress response. From an evolutionary standpoint, one of the most important stressors that the human body had to endure was the sun. So there's a major relationship between the stress response and stress chemistry and pigmentation, which means that in addition to the sun in our modern 2024 American lifestyle, there's going to be lots of inducements for the body to stress, from psychological to physiological. So psychological stress and physiologic stress will induce pigmentation via a mediating family of chemicals called, no, that's the specifics, but the family is hormones. Oh. In other words, pigmentation is hormonally mediated. And when you have fluctuations in hormones, you're going to have fluctuations in pigment. The major hormones that are involved are your stress hormones, but also pseudo-stress hormones like thyroid hormone and insulin are also involved in the stress response. So you want to consider hyperpigmentation as part of general duress on the body. And that's why it's so hard to treat topically. If you don't address the hormonal mediators of stress, you're not going to be able to address pigmentation other than superficially and topically. So as estheticians, you guys aren't necessarily supposed to be helping people with their internal hormones, but in a way you have to. So you got to tell people about estrogen. You got to figure out why estrogen is off, why estrogen is out of balance, why blood sugar and insulin are involved, thyroid hormone is wonky, hypothyroidism is related to estrogen. So there's a whole bunch of interlocking hormonal mediators that are associated with the stress response, which is why pigmentation always comes back, and pigmentation is really difficult to deal with, particularly when there is a topical stressor, i.e. post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. So if the hormonal system is out of balance and somebody gets a wound, pimple, some kind of abrasion, something on the skin, very often it'll come back hyperpigmented, and there's not a lot you can do from a topical perspective, with the exception of burning off or with laser, or burning off with chemicals like hydroquinone or skin peels to get rid of the pigment. That being said, there are still things that you can do, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. So, the root causes of pigmentation, aging, changes in hormones associated with the aging response. Is really interesting how the sun gets blamed a lot of times for hyperpigmentation. People say, oh, I'm always wearing sunscreen, I always wear sun protection, I'm not out in the sun, but I'm still hyperpigmented. That's because it's not necessarily the sun that's causing the problem. Think about it. When we were kids, we were all out in the sun, playing around in the sun. Did we hyperpigment? Did you ever see a little kid with melasma or a baby with melasma? That alone should tell you that it's not the sun's fault. Because kids or people who don't have hormonal imbalances can be out in the sun and they're not going to hyperpigment. So you want to regard hyperpigmentation as a hormonal issue that's associated with aging, as well as, surprise, surprise, the gut, specifically the intestine. There's a whole bunch of relationships between hormones and the intestine, specifically when it comes to estrogen. And as women, you guys should all know this, that if you're dealing with some kind of estrogenic health issue, whether it's hyperpigmentation or whether it's something like polyps or cysts or fibroids or menstrual problems or reproductive problems, if you're dealing with any of those kinds of issues, fibromyalgia, endometriosis, all of these are estrogenic kinds of conditions. The intestine is the locus of control for processing of estrogen. So it's not just taking estrogen, and it's not necessarily even balancing estrogen. If you have a problem with, say, dysbiosis, do you guys know what that is? Problems with bacteria in the intestine. There's a condition which you may have heard of, and if you haven't heard of it yet, you will hear of it soon because it's becoming very well recognized, called SIBO. You guys heard of SIBO, S-I-B-O, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? How many nurses remember that? Professionals, anybody? No? So have you heard of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? This is behind almost every single chronic health condition you can name, whether it's a skin problem, an autoimmune problem, a thyroid problem, or even cancer or heart disease, two of the leading causes of death in this country, the top 2 leading causes of death. SIBO is behind all of this. SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It has to do with hyperproliferation of bacteria inside the intestine. So you have 2 intestines, you have a small intestine and a large intestine. Bacteria are only supposed to be in the large intestine. The small intestine isn't supposed to have a lot of bacteria. Why do you suppose that most of our microbiome, you guys know what the microbiome is? Why do you suppose most of the microbiome is in the large intestine? It's supposed to be the large intestine versus the small intestine. Any ideas?
And I should have the answer.
Well, you have food in the small intestine. So you don't want to have bacteria where you have food, because the bacteria will proliferate in response to the food. So nature has set up a system where the microbiome is located in the large intestine versus the small intestine. By the time the food gets into what we ate, it's not no longer food, gets into the large intestine, there's no longer nutritive value, supposedly, and that's why nature set up a system where the bacteria will be in the large intestine versus small intestine. However, because of things like low stomach acid, antibiotics in our food, chronic constipation, which I'll talk about here in a second, and then ingestion of sugars, lots of sugars, specifically a class of sugars called FODMAPs. You guys ever hear that? FODMAP stands for fermentable oligo monosaccharides and polyols. These are sugars that are found in foods that are supposed to be, that are good for us, but not good for everybody. Avocados and bananas, and pears and apples. These are all foods that you would think would be really good for you, but they can exacerbate SIBO. And a lot of people are thinking they're vegetarians, or they're only eating organic, or they're trying to pay attention to what they're eating, but they're actually feeding bacteria in the small intestine. Once bacteria proliferate in the small intestine, a lot of things can go wrong. Number one, what can happen is you're going to end up with what's called leaky gut. Leaky gut is inflammation that occurs in the gut lining, allowing food particles to get into the intestine. This is why, or get into the blood from the intestine. This is why all health challenges should be backtracked to the intestine. All of them, all chronic health challenges should be backtracked to the intestine. But as far as hormones go, there are a group of hormones in the small intestine that can actually, there's a group of bacteria in the small intestine that can actually break up metabolize estrogen and make it more potent. Under ordinary circumstances, estrogen is cleared out through the intestine via the action of bile. This is really important, you guys, because a lot of women are dealing with estrogenic issues, hyperestrogenic issues, because bacteria are reactivating estrogen that should be cleared out. So you have excess bacteria in the small intestine. These bacteria have a potentizing effect on estrogen. So you guys follow this? Under ordinary circumstances, estrogen is cleared out through the intestine by the action of bile, and it's gone. However, if there's excess bacteria in the small intestine, instead of dumping out the estrogen, it gets reactivated. And this is a very common problem in people who have estrogenic symptoms, including, as I say, fibroid cysts, reproductive problems, menstrual problems, fibromyalgia, endometriosis, cancers even, estrogenic cancers. And estrogenic cancers, by the way, I don't need to tell you guys this, about breast cancer, cervical cancer, and ovarian cancer should always be backtracked to intestinal health problems. And as far as the skin goes, estrogen, which is a potent pigmentizer. Why would you suppose estrogen be involved in the pigmentation process based on what we just talked about? Why would estrogen be a pigmenting agent or a pigmenting stimulating agent? Any ideas? Well, pigmentation is part of the stress response. Estrogen is a stress-related hormone, believe it or not, right? Estrogen is related to stress. You don't realize that, but estrogen activates inflammatory chemistry. This is why most autoimmune diseases and most inflammatory diseases affect women. You guys know that? Most inflammatory diseases and autoimmune diseases affect women. It's that affect a lot. It's almost like 8 times as many autoimmune patients are women. 8 to 9 times more autoimmune patients are women than men because of estrogen. Anytime you have a gender discrepancy in the health challenge, in other words, women get it more than men, you want to look at estrogen because that's the main distinguishing hormone between men and women. So all estrogenic issues should be backtracked to the intestine, including hyperpigmentation. If you're trying to get rid of hyperpigmentation without dealing with intestinal health, it's going to be a tough slog. Yes.
What is your take on the fact that people are now putting estrogen on their faces?
Estrogen is very interesting, and I'll tell you, estrogen has a reputation as being a youth hormone, and this is why women use estrogen replacement therapy, hormone replacement therapy. And it's also why they don't use estrogen on their skin. Estrogen is associated with soft skin. It's associated with more collagen, and that can be helpful topically, but you may run into issues with hyperpigmentation as well, conceivably because of that. Interestingly, estrogen has a antagonizing hormone that balances it out. What's that called? Progesterone. And as toxic as estrogen is, that's how non-toxic progesterone is. If you look at, I don't have a chart for this, but if you look at the way hormones are produced, steroid hormones are produced, they all come from a parent. All the steroid hormones come from a parent, which is from a master molecule, which then gets turned into all the steroid hormones. Anybody know what that master molecule is? Cholesterol. And this is why cholesterol is the single most valuable and important molecule in the body. So all of the demonization around cholesterol doesn't take into account the real biochemistry of cholesterol, which is that it's the parent of all the good stuff, all the hormones that keep you young and strong and healthy and vital. In fact, cholesterol is the distinguishing feature between animals and plants. Only animals make cholesterol. Plants don't make cholesterol. Cholesterol is responsible for movement. It's responsible for action. It's responsible for neurology. Cholesterol is the molecule that allows us to be different from a plant. We move, we think, we take action, we ambulate. Cholesterol is the life. It's the most important molecule for the life of an animal. And this is why cholesterol has such a bad reputation. Say it again. Cholesterol is the most important molecule for building things, for making things happen. Whether you're making things happen neurologically, or whether you're making things happen in terms of your muscles, or whether you're making things happen in terms of growing cells, because all cells have a coating of cholesterol in their cell membrane. So why is it that this incredibly valuable molecule is responsible for building and for growing and for movement and for neurology has got such a bad reputation? Why is it that people have elevated cholesterol? Why is it that cholesterol levels rise, given that cholesterol is a building molecule? What are we all doing in our lives that is tricking our body into thinking it's supposed to be building? What?
Is it our nutrition?
You're on the right track, yes. The reason cholesterol levels go up is because we are eating something way too much that's associated with building. What are we all eating that's associated with building? Sugar. Cholesterol levels go up when your blood sugar goes up, or when your insulin goes up. And there's any diabetics in this room, or anybody who knows diabetics?
I'm pre-diabetic.
Diabetic?
Pre-diabetic.
Pre-diabetic. So you know that you probably have a cholesterol issue as well, right? Diabetes and elevated cholesterol go hand in hand. And you don't have to be diagnosed as a pre-diabetic or diabetic to have what's called dysglycemia. See, diabetes is a brand name, like Kleenex. The medical model has brand names for diseases, and we're not even allowed to say these diseases. I can't say that something will cure diabetes or reverse diabetes because the brand names are owned. They're copyrighted. They're not literally copyrighted, but they're essentially copyrighted. But what you can say is dysglycemia. Dysglycemia is a biochemical phenomenon that's like tissues to Kleenex. Diabetes is Kleenex. It's a brand name. Tissues is generic. I can say tissues all day long, but I can never say Kleenex in that because Kimberly Clark owns the name Kleenex. Likewise, the medical model owns the name diabetes. So I can't say diabetes, but I can say dysglycemia. The problem isn't necessarily diabetes, which is a brand name. It's messed up blood sugar. Dys means dysfunctional. Glyce means sugar. Emia means in the blood. So dysglycemia, elevated blood sugar, disruptions in blood sugar secondary to eating a lot of sugar. And by the way, potatoes are sugar and rice is sugar and cereal is sugar. It doesn't have to be cake and pie and soda pop, although we're eating a lot of those too. Pretty much if you like a food, pretty much there's sugar in it. You know, what's America's favorite vegetable?
Potato.
The potato, right? but not exactly the potato. What?
French fries.
French fries, exactly. And why do we like French fries so much? Why do we like potatoes?
Delicious.
It's the sugar. It's not. They're delicious because of the sugar. If you want to make a lot of money, you guys, if you want to make a lot of money, figure out a way to combine a human being's 3 favorite tastes into one food, and then go out on the street and open up a little cart or a little stand and sell a food that has these 3 favorite tastes: sugar, salt, and fat. We can't get enough sugar, salt, and fat. And that's because from an evolutionary perspective, there wasn't a lot of sugar on the African savanna when the human body was growing up. We were lucky to get a couple berries or maybe some honey. But there wasn't a lot of sugar, and sugar is required for quick energy. There wasn't a lot of fat. It was very difficult to get fat. On the African savanna, you have to kill a woolly mammoth to get fat back in the day. So our bodies developed this hard wiring for finding sugar and salt. So and fat. Sugar, salt, and fat. And salt also is very hard to find in the African savanna because salt is only found where there's a lot of water. So our bodies evolved in an environment that was very low sugar, salt, and fat, and we all developed hard wiring for going for sugar, salt, and fat. Think about all the foods you like: pizza, nachos, chips of all kinds. You know, the biggest companies in the world are chip companies. They're not the drug companies; they're the companies that make Fritos and Doritos and chips, because chips are a combination of sugar, salt, and fat. All the foods human beings love to eat, burritos, human beings love to eat, are combinations of sugar, salt, and fat. So what I'm saying is we're all getting too much sugar, salt, and fat. Sugar especially, because sugar is very cheap. Fat and salt also, but sugar is very cheap. So human beings have developed this hard wiring for going for sugar. We're all eating too much sugar. That raises cholesterol. Why would sugar raise cholesterol? Well, sugar tricks the body into thinking it's supposed to be building, and cholesterol is our building molecule. So if you want to drop your cholesterol, you don't need a statin drug. You need to reduce your sugar intake or use nutrients that help the body process sugar. And interestingly, things like chromium, which helps the body process sugar, niacin, which helps the body process sugar, the B complex and thiamine, which help the body process sugar, also lower cholesterol. It's not a coincidence. It's because when you lower your blood sugar, you're going to lower your cholesterol. So that being said, elevated cholesterol, or I should say cholesterol, is your master hormone, and it's responsible for the production of all the good stuff. So it's responsible for the production of testosterone and estrogen and cortisol and vitamin D and something called DHEA. Estrogen and progesterone both come from cholesterol, but progesterone is at the top and estrogen is at the bottom. So cholesterol gets turned into progesterone, and then it gets turned into a bunch of other hormones, and then at the very end, it gets turned into estrogen. Because estrogen is at the bottom, it's the most potent of all the steroid hormones. Progesterone, which is at the top, is the most mild of all the steroid hormones, and progesterone balances out estrogen. And because it's at the top of the flow, does that make sense, you guys, how I'm saying this? Cholesterol gets turned into estrogen, which gets turned into DHEA and pregnenolone, and down it goes until you get to testosterone and estrogen at the bottom. Estrogen at the bottom is the most potent of all the steroid hormones. Progesterone at the top is the most gentle of all the steroid hormones. Why do you suppose that would be? Why would the ones at the bottom be more gentle or more potent than the ones at the top? Because at the top, the body can turn the molecule into all kinds of other things, but at the bottom, it can't. There's nothing left. It's at the bottom. So it can't get turned into anything else. It has to be completely eliminated. So estrogen, as it turns out, is active in very, 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 very tiny amounts. How many of you guys are on an estrogen product, estrogen cream or Premarin? Anybody? No? If you see your estrogen cream or estrogen product, estrogen pill, you'll see it's dosed at very tiny concentrations, 0.1%, 0.01%, very, very small amounts because of its potency. Progesterone, on the other hand, you could use 1%, 2%, 3%. You can use 10 or 100 times as much progesterone. But progesterone is the perfect balance for estrogen. And if you're trying to balance out your estrogen, if you have some kind of estrogenic health challenge, like endometriosis, like fibroids, like cysts, like reproductive problems, like an autoimmune issue, like fibromyalgia, or like hyperpigmentation, progesterone can help balance out that estrogen. And progesterone being non-toxic, you don't have to worry about not only toxicity, but you don't even have to worry about a doctor's prescription. You can get it over the counter. In fact, we sell a progesterone topical in our pharmacy downstairs. Anybody use ProHarmony? You use ProHarmony. ProHarmony topical will actually have an anti-pigmentation effect. This actually has a skin lightening effect, unlike estrogen, topical estrogen, which can have a hyperpigmenting effect. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just did a pop-up event and there were 3 women that were all associated together. One of them is a rep for a hormone company, like that you could buy online. And all 3 of them had the most unusual texture and so much random, no, hair growth.
Hair growth. Oh, that's
Yes.
interesting. Now, hair growth is another whole other hormonal issue. Have you guys been see body hair or hair in the face or hair in the body? Are you seeing that? Oh, well, you're doing laser. The most important reason for body hair and hair growth is a health condition that is also associated with pigmentation called PCOS. Have you guys heard of that? PCOS, what does that stand for? Polycystic ovarian syndrome, right? So obviously the name tells you what it is. It's a lot of cysts in the ovary, polycystic ovary. Now, why would that cause a syndrome? A syndrome is a health challenge where you have a lot of different symptoms. That's what makes something a syndrome. There's a lot of different things. So in PCOS, you have people who have oily, in terms of skin, they'll have oily skin, they'll have hair, they'll have body hair, they'll have acne breakouts. In terms of the body, they'll be overweight. They'll have estrogenic symptoms. They'll have reproductive and menstrual issues. They may have fibroids or cysts, or breast tenderness. All of this is involved in the syndrome. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is a real horrible condition because the cysts in the ovary make hormones. Ovarian tissue makes hormones. So when you have a cyst, or you have lots of cysts, you're making lots of hormones. You're making lots of excess estrogen. You're making lots of excess testosterone. And this is really the etiology or the cause of all of the symptoms. You have lots of testosterone, lots of male hormone, thus you have the body hair, thus you have the acne, thus you have the oily skin, and you're making lots of estrogen, thus you have the weight problems and the fibroids and the cysts and the dysmenorrhea. So it's a condition where you're making lots of testosterone and lots of estrogen. Because you're making lots of testosterone, testosterone makes things grow. You end up with keratinocytes, your skin cells that are growing really fast. When keratinocytes grow really fast and out of control within a follicle, that's when you get pimples. That's when you get a breakout. That's when you get a clog, a comedone. Testosterone also turns on the sebocytes, the cells that make sebum, so you end up with oily skin. And estrogen is a pigmentizing agent. So these patients will have acne and oily skin and post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation in terms of their skin. That's PCOS. So how do you deal with PCOS? Well, it's a hormonal issue that's not It involves estrogen and testosterone, but the main trigger for PCOS is insulin. PCOS patients should be treated like diabetics. So if you have a PCOS patient, you want to treat them like a diabetic or like a dysglycemic. And that means all the blood sugar things. This is where understanding how blood sugar is involved with the skin, how insulin is involved with the skin is going to make you a powerful esthetician. So what do you do for a patient who's got PCOS if you want to work on insulin and blood sugar? Any ideas?
Drop the sugar.
Obviously, drop the sugar. How about for nutrients?
With the blemish repair.
Blemish repair is actually designed with nutrients specifically for blood sugar. Have you noticed there's chromium in blemish repair? Why chromium? Chromium doesn't have anything to do with acne. Chromium is a very powerful blood sugar controlling mineral. In fact, one of the molecules in the body that helps us control sugar is something called the glucose tolerance factor, the GTF. The glucose tolerance factor potentizes or makes insulin stronger, and the glucose tolerance factor is primarily made up of chromium and niacin, vitamin B3. Vitamin B3 is also a fabulously valuable nutrient. In fact, vitamin B3, it is arguably the most important of all of the vitamins, all the water-soluble vitamins. It's the one vitamin that your body will actually make in deficiency states. In fact, some people don't even believe it's a vitamin because the body will actually make it, and the definition of a vitamin is something your body can't make. Nonetheless, when it was discovered, they called it a vitamin, even though the body does make a little bit of it. Anybody know the disease is caused by niacin deficiency? Say it louder.
Is that it?
I heard you say pellagra.
Okay.
Do you know what pellagra means?
Dying?
No, it doesn't. It's associated with death. You can die from pellagra, and a lot of people historically, before they discovered niacin, did die from pellagra. Pellagra means in Italian. Nobody speaks Italian or no?
Slow?
It means rough skin,
Oh.
right? Because one of pellagra's symptoms, one of niacin symptoms, is problem skin. Pellagra being a disease state, a deficiency disease state. But if you just have not enough niacin, you may not have full-blown pellagra, but you could have skin issues. Dermatitises and rashes, unexplained, can be due to niacin deficiencies. Niacin deficiency also affects the intestine, and a lot of times we find that vitamins that affect the skin also affect the intestine, because the intestine is like your skin. The skin is like the intestine inside out or outside in, and the skin is like the skin is like the intestine, similar cellular type, except it's on the outside. And when you think about it, the intestine is kind of like a type of skin on the inside. It's sort of a barrier. The way the skin is a barrier on the outside of our body, the intestine is a barrier on the inside of the body. So a lot of times there's a relationship between skin diseases and intestinal diseases, which is another reason why estheticians should always be focusing on the intestine when you're dealing with any skin health issue. So niacin is part of the glucose tolerance factor, and for anybody who's dealing with PCOS, hyperpigmentation, PCOS-related hyperpigmentation, niacin is something to think about. Without
Are the bees in the blemish repair, are those methylated?
most of the bees are methylated. The two main ones, methylcobalamin, which is vitamin B12, and I think that's the only one that's methylated. It is the methylcobalamin.
But it works for people that have the methyl genetic?
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. If you ever want to talk about MTHFR, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
MTHFR. MTHFR deficiency is related to stress, like everything else. And it's not a curse. It's not like you have a genetic defect. It's really an adaptive response to stress. Some 40 to 50% of Americans have MTHFR deficiency. So we're led to believe, do you guys all know about this? MTHFR is an enzyme that's involved in the methylation process. Methylation is one of the ways that nutrients or biochemicals get activated, and not everybody can do this methylation effectively. Methylation defects follow stress. The body's kind of trying to calm things down when you have an MTHFR deficiency. It's not a genetic defect in the sense that you're permanently cursed with it.
Oh.
You're not permanently cursed with an MTHFR deficiency. As you change the way you live your life, you can start to methylate again. That being said, you can also use methylating nutrients like SAMe, methylcobalamin, vitamin B6. There's different nutrients that you can use to help methylate, to support methylation. That being said, methylated nutrients are probably the way to go if you have an MTHFR deficiency, pre-methylated, if you have a problem with methylation. But I don't want to get too much into that, except to say that MTHFR deficiency should be regarded as a sign of overall poor health, rather than some kind of genetic curse. So controlling blood sugar is really important. Niacin can help you do that. Chromium can help you do that. Thiamine, which in my opinion is the most underappreciated of all the vitamins, is very important for helping the body handle sugar. In fact, one of the things that happens when people have diabetes, and you may know this, is something called peripheral neuropathy. Have you heard of peripheral neuropathy? Do you have any issues that way?
No, but my sister did.
Like in the toes or fingers kind of thing? Peripheral neuropathy is a sign of dysglycemia and mostly occurs in diabetics or people who have messed up blood sugar. And thiamine is a treatment for peripheral neuropathy. In fact, thiamine was discovered in the late 1800s when it was noticed that people who would eat foods that contain thiamine, specifically rice polishings, would have their peripheral neuropathy go away. And they started to examine the rice polishings to see what was in the rice polishings. And that's when they discovered thiamine, vitamin B1, which to this day, I believe is the most underappreciated of all, maybe of all the vitamins, certainly of all the B vitamins. Thiamine is an amazing treatment for chronic constipation. It's an amazing treatment for attention deficit disorder. It's an amazing treatment for cardiovascular disease. It's a amazing treatment for chronic fatigue. In fact, what's the disease caused by vitamin B1 deficiency? Do you know? Thiamine is vitamin B1. It's called beriberi, which in Swahili means I can't. Because people who have beriberi can't get out of bed. People who have beriberi have, thyme is involved in neurology. So people who have beriberi, their nerves don't work, their muscles don't work. So they feel they're fatigued and tired. Their heart doesn't work as effectively. Their peripheral neuropathy, which is a nerve disease, can happen when you have beriberi or any kind of thiamine deficiency issue. And because the recommended daily allowance of thiamine is like 1.5 milligrams a day, and you need about 100 milligrams a day, most people are deficient in thiamine. And to compound the problem, thiamine is used by the body to process sugar. So the more sugar you're eating, or for that matter, the more alcohol you're drinking, the more likely you're going to be to have thiamine deficiency. In fact, if you, sometimes you'll see in 5 Points where our lab used to be, you'll see alcoholics out there talking to, sometimes, no, well, you'll see them sometimes talking to themselves or talking to pink leprechauns or pink elephants or, having these delusions. They call it alcoholic psychosis is a technical name for this. And I don't know, in New York, I used to see it all the time. I haven't seen it too much in Denver, where they're basically alcoholics who are psychotic. They're delusional. They're hallucinating. That condition technically is called Werner-Korsakoff syndrome, but we call it alcoholic psychosis. And they take that drunk and they put him in the drunk tank. Guess what they give them to get rid of their alcoholic psychosis? Right in their blood, thiamine, cure for alcoholic psychosis. But you may not have alcoholic psychosis to have, you may not be exhibiting alcoholic psychosis to have thiamine deficiency. You may just have attention deficit disorder. You may have problems focusing. You may have memory issues. And we know that all of these problems are associated with thiamine deficiency. You got to wonder how many people are diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's disease, or who have problems with their memories and are taking Prevagen and think it's just age-related when it's just a simple thiamine deficiency. This is why I consider myself a nutritional pharmacist, by the way, because there's so many strategies that we have available to us to deal with our health challenges that are not pharmaceutical. And we just have this model in our minds that's been promoted and has been mimetically injected into the culture that when you're sick, you take a drug. When it turns out that most of our health challenges have some kind of nutritional deficiency at their core. Even when somebody dies, they don't die necessarily of the heart disease or the cancer. They die because some cellular system is not getting nutriated as effectively. Yes, ma'am.
Your blood control?
Yes.
That niacin in the therapeutic dose?
Yes, absolutely. One knock on niacin, by the way, is the niacin flush. And you can get...
So you're saying niacin and then thiamine.
Oh, yes, there's a good healthy dose of thiamine. Absolutely, yes. But one knock on niacin is the niacin flush. If you make no flush niacin, I'd still recommend the flush niacin because it's better for the blood system. And you do, have you guys ever gotten the niacin flush? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Right? Niacin flush?
Your old vitamin B.
My old ones did, yeah. And we would get calls periodically. Oh my God, what's happening to me? And get the niacin flush. It goes away. It only happens if you take too much. And if you really want to make sure that you don't get the niacin flush, make sure you're taking essential fatty acids, which we'll talk about here in a second, with your niacin, and you won't get the niacin flush.
How much thiamine is in your blemish repair? Because my mom's losing her memory.
Well, so you don't want to take the blemish repair for like memory, or just because of the thiamine. But there's 11 milligrams of thiamine for 3 capsules a year.
What do you recommend?
I recommend 100 milligrams for time. Yeah. I recommend 100 milligrams a day, but I like something called benfotiamine. That's right. Benfotiamine is like a deluxe form of thiamine. It's handled by the body a little bit more. And it's relatively cheap.
Where can you get that?
Online.
Amazon?
BENFOTIAMINE. Benfotiamine. I think I mentioned this about constipation. There's actually a condition called GI beriberi. Do you ever hear people who are chronically constipated, like there's nothing they can do to have a bowel movement? Oftentimes that's a neurological issue. And thiamine, being important for neurology, can also help with this condition, this GI beriberi, which manifests as chronic, intractable constipation. I'm not talking about just once in a while, but just intractable. Nothing helps constipation. As far as constipation goes, that's a very, very interesting and important aspect of hyperpigmentation. If you're chronically constipated, estrogen is going to build up in your body. So thiamine can be one strategy that you can use. Also, believe it or not, this is really fascinating. There's a complex of nerves that run through your digestive tract called the MMC, the migrating motor complex. Anybody heard of this? The MMC, the migrating motor complex. is a complex of nerves that propels food through the digestive tract. The migrating motor complex is inactivated by food. When you eat, the migrating motor complex slows down. Why would that make sense? When you eat, the migrating motor complex, which propels the food through the digestive system, it slows down, it's inhibited.
Yeah.
To absorb the food, exactly. So the more we eat, or the more frequently we eat, the less likely we're going to be to eliminate. In other words, eating inhibits elimination, which is why, how many of you guys have fasted ever, and you notice that you have this amazing bowel movement, like the day after you fast, or even that night? It's because when the migrating motor complex doesn't have any, when there's no food in the digestive tract, the migrating motor complex is activated. In fact, you've all heard the migrating motor complex with your ears. The migrating motor complex sounds like a grumbling in your tummy. That's the migrating motor complex. And instead of using that grumbling in our tummy as a sign that our digestive system is cleaning itself out, we use it as a signal to eat. Exactly. It doesn't mean you're hungry. It means your body's working. It's clearing things out. So the next time you hear the migrating motor complex, don't eat. The next time you hear that rumbling in your tummy, don't eat. You want to improve the body's ability to eliminate itself, especially if you're dealing with excess estrogenic issues, or excess estrogenic health challenges like hyperpigmentation. The sun obviously is a trigger for hyperpigmentation, but it shouldn't happen. You should get a tan when you're out in the sun, not hyperpigmentation. If you're not tanning evenly from the sun, then there's something else going on, usually estrogen, or it could also involve thyroid hormones, we'll talk about here in a second. And there's a very important relationship between estrogen and thyroid hormone. Estrogen will slow down the thyroid. Remember, estrogen is an upper. It's a speedy hormone. It's a stress hormone. Makes things happen. What's estrogen's main role? To grow a baby. Makes cells divide. So you want to think of estrogen as a hormone that makes things happen. When you're hyperestrogenic, to compensate, the thyroid will slow down. So this is a common combination of hormonal dysfunction that women have: elevated estrogen and hypothyroidism. And again, hypothyroidism is mostly a female issue. Like 90% of hypothyroid patients are women because of this relationship to estrogen. There's a couple other things that go on in hypothyroidism, but there's also a primary relationship to estrogen. So photo damage can also cause, or the sun, I should say, can also cause hyperpigmentation, but it shouldn't happen. If that's the case, don't blame the sun. And there are people who think that, oh, I just put more sunscreen on, or I'll put more sunblock on, or avoid the sun, and that's not a great strategy for not hyperpigmenting. And you probably know that I always talk about the problems associated with sunscreens, sunscreen chemicals, that is, versus zinc oxide. And by the way, hi there. Do you want to? You come in. Did you want me?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I just wanted to give
Speaking of sunscreens are estrogenic. Many sunscreens function as xenoestrogens. Xeno means foreign. Estrogens that are similar to the hormone that your body makes, or chemicals that are similar to the hormone that the body makes, but not exactly the same, but similar enough that they can activate the hormone receptor and activate an estrogenic response. Have you guys heard this term, xenoestrogens? These are not exactly estrogen. And quick digression here, estrogen is not one thing. There are lots of things that act like estrogen. In the body, you have about 20 different molecules that are part of the estrogen family. There's 3. If you're on hormone replacement, you probably know there's estrone, estradiol, and estriol. And those are the big 3. But there's other molecules that the body makes that act like estrogen. And there are cosmetic ingredients that act like estrogen. For example, parabens and other preservatives can act like estrogen. There are herbs in skincare products that can act like estrogen, and sunscreens can act like estrogen. So ironically, you may be using a sunscreen to protect yourself from the sun, but the xenoestrogenic effect of the sunscreen may be inducing hyperpigmentation or other estrogenic kinds of effects. Nutritional deficiencies, we talked about that. Environmental toxicity, that's basically xenoestrogens. And it's all really about the melanocyte, the pigment-making cell. The melanocyte is the cell that makes, obviously, melanin, it's like the cell. melanin. It's mostly found in the basal layer. What's interesting about the melanocyte is when the melanocyte makes pigment, the pigmentation, the darkening of the skin, doesn't occur in the melanocyte. It occurs in the skin cell, the keratinocyte. So you have your skin, you have your melanocytes scattered around, mostly in the lower levels of the epidermis. They make the melanin. And then they do this really cool thing where they will actually inject the melanin into the keratinocyte as it's rising up to the top. So the pigmentation occurs in the keratinocyte. And this is very important because this gives us a strategy for dealing with hyperpigmentation, because the keratinocyte is going to ultimately end up in the stratum corneum. Via exfoliation techniques, you can get rid of hyperpigmentation. And that's really one of the most important strategies for an esthetician or for a patient to get rid of hyperpigmentation is exfoliation. The reason that works is because the pigmentation is occurring in the keratinocyte and ultimately in the corneocyte. And via exfoliation, you can help lighten the skin. However, as you may know, as you may have experienced, if a patient is unstable hormonally, exfoliation can actually trigger more hyperpigmentation, which will be a bummer for the patient and a bummer for you if you do a peel on a client to get rid of their hyperpigmentation and they get more hyperpigmentation. So you have to recognize that while sloughing off of the keratinocyte and the corneocyte to get rid of pigment is helpful, you got to stabilize the hormones.
Okay. So how do we help the melanocyte then? Because that's where
You don't help them. Well, you can work on the melanocyte through tyrosinase inhibitors, which don't work that well,
Okay.
as you may have experienced. I'm not a big fan of tyrosinase inhibitors. But we have another strategy for working with melanocyte. That's we'll talk about that here in a second. This is what the skin looks like here. You guys have all seen this, I'm sure. Let's see. The melanocyte would be probably over here in the very bottom of the epidermis. Let's get this here. So your main pigments. This is also interesting. Melanin is the pigment. That's your main hyperpigmenting pigment that's associated with hyperpigmentation. But there's another pigment in the body that has nothing to do with melanin. And this gets oftentimes confused with melanin. Have you ever tried to lighten somebody's skin or do peels on somebody's dark spots and they don't go away? And you do the peel and it just doesn't go away, right? Or you use the hydroquinone or whatever the skin lightener is and it won't go away. That's because sometimes you're not dealing with melanin. You're dealing with another pigment called lipofuchsin. Have you guys ever heard of lipofuchsin? Lipofuchsin is a completely different chemical than melanin. All the strategies we've talked about so far and that you use in your practice work to demelanize the skin, to get rid of pigment, melanin pigment. That is the sloughing and the hydroquinone and the lasers and the skin peels and retinols. All of these have an ability to get rid of melanin, but they can't get rid of lipofuchsin. Lipofuchsin is the aging pigment, and it's not a pigment that's protective like melanin. It's a waste product. When cells die, they're supposed to get incinerated, burnt up, the inside of the cells, and then it gets drained out through the lymph. However, under conditions of lymphatic congestion, toxins don't leave through the lymph. They get deposited in various parts of the body, and they will especially get deposited in the skin where they will look like yellowish. They won't quite look like melanin. Melanin has a darker appearance. Lipofuchsin has a yellowish appearance, and it oftentimes will appear on the hands. Yes, they call them age spots. And you can do all the retinol and hydroquinone and lasers and skin lightening strategies that you want. You're not going to get rid of lipofuchsin because it's an accumulation of waste from dead cells that are not being drained out through the lymph. Lipofuchsin happens in the nervous system, happens in the eyes, it happens in the brain. It happens throughout the nervous system in the body. Lipofuchsin is associated with toxicity as well as congestion in the elimination vessels, that is the lymphatic vessels. So the way you deal with lipofuchsin is you got to flush it with lymphatic drainage, with overall health strategies to keep the body healthy. You can use something lecithin. Lecithin has a a benefit for draining out toxicity out of the body. You can get rid of melanin with all our skin lightening strategies, but if you can't get rid of them, if it looks like pigmentation, you can't get rid of it, chances are it's not melanin, it's lipofusion. Yes, Lori.
I read that ice baths can encourage.
Not quite.
Not
You're
quite.
half right.
Okay.
Lymphatic drainage.
Mhm.
Yeah. What do ice baths do? They cause contraction. So you're only half right, because what you want to do to increase lymphatic drainage is ice baths followed by warm water, followed by ice baths. In fact, if you're in the shower, you can actually, you have to be pretty brave to do this, but if you're brave, you can turn the cold water on and then the hot water on, and you get this accordion-like effect on your lymph. The cold water will constrict the lymphatic vessels, the warm water will open it, the cold water will constrict it and open it, and you get this opening and closing effect. That's why people take cold plunges. They'll do hot tubs and cold plunges. Have you ever heard of Wim Hof, that whole Wim Hof thing? You sit in a hot tub, you jump in the cold plunge, you go back in the hot tub, you go back in the cold plunge. That has an accordion-like effect that will help squeeze the lymphatic vessels. There's lots of ways to improve lymphatic drainage. Hanging upside down on one of those inversion devices, that's a great way to do it. Jumping up and down on a rebounder is a great way to improve lymphatic. Dry brushing, if you ever do dry brushing, that's a great way to help with lymphatic drainage. Lymphatic massage is another strategy that estheticians can use. For patients who have lipofusion, all of these strategies can be helpful. Also, for patients who get chronic colds or chronic infections, supporting lymphatic drainage is really, really important. Also, for people who have cystic acne, lymphatic drainage can be helpful. Do you want to say something?
No.
How about vibration plates?
Vibration plates, absolutely, that will help. Anything that you could do to shake things up. Exercise, deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing is another great strategy for improving lymphatic drainage.
How much lecithin?
Granules, like a teaspoon a day, a couple teaspoons a day. Lecithin is one of the all-time great nutritional supplements, and it's one of the all-time great skin supplements for dry skin. And lecithin, we use lecithin derivatives in a lot of our products. In our hyaluronic mineral hydrator has phospholipids. Lecithin is a complex of phospholipids. Foods, I've always said this, and I was getting a little heat from this, but eggs are the skin's most important food. Eggs contain, in fact, eggs are the body's most important food. Eggs are like a multiple nutrient supplement for cells. Why do you suppose an egg would be the perfect nutrient for cells?
It is a cell.
Because it is a cell. That's exactly right. An egg is a cell. You're eating a cell, so you get all the nutrients that you need in the cell. And now that we just talked about cholesterol, the main reason why cholesterol goes up, now you know you don't have to worry about eating cholesterol. Although, I will say that you don't want to heat your egg too much. Because when you heat your egg, you disturb or distort the fats and the cholesterol, and cholesterol goes from being a very important molecule to being a somewhat toxic molecule via oxidation. So you don't want to do your eggs like scrambled or even fried. You don't want to fry your eggs. The best way to do your eggs is raw, believe it or not, or poached or soft boiled. Raw eggs are kind of delicious too. Anybody ever had a raw egg? You can't believe it? You can't believe that a raw egg is delicious. Raise your hands. Do you ever hear of an orange Julius?
Oh, yeah.
What's an orange Julius?
Whoa.
Just egg.
It's orange juice with an egg cracked into it, right?
So good.
It's so good, right? It's just egg. Now they use egg powder, but the original ones, they just crack the raw egg into orange juice. And eggs make it taste really creamy.
You guys have egg powder?
So these are the four major hormones that are involved with the stress response. Estrogen, we talked about. Cortisol, stress hormone. Cortisol will also act as a pigmentizer, so reducing stress. Now, whenever we hear about stress, we hear about psychological, or we think about psychological stress. But stress can be physiologic as well. So if you're dealing with hyperinsulinemia or dysglycemia, messed up blood sugar, that can cause problems with cortisol. When we eat sugar, something really interesting happens. Sugar is very explosive stuff, and the body can't handle a lot of sugar. You're not supposed to have a lot of sugar in the blood. At any given moment, if you're healthy, you have about a teaspoon or so of sugar in your blood. If you drink a Coke, you now put about 20 teaspoons of sugar into your body, and that goes right into your bloodstream. So you have a system that can only handle, or when it's healthy, can only handle 1 teaspoon of sugar, but most of us are eating multiple teaspoons of sugar all the time, and sometimes in juices and in liquids like soda where the sugar goes right into the bloodstream. So the body has a very elaborate system for keeping sugar out of the blood. Sugar is very, very explosive stuff. Do you ever get a sugar burn? You ever make pastries and you get a little drop of hot sugar? It burns really hot. And so to the body, sugar represents a danger. So the body has to pull sugar out very quickly once sugar goes into the system, which is why when you eat sugar, a lot of sugar, you'll notice half hour, an hour later, you're tired, right? This happens to babies a lot. And when a baby's cranky because they're low blood sugar, we tend to give the baby sugar, whether it's apple juice or applesauce or pear juice or banana or baby food, all of which are high amounts of sugar. The sugar gets pulled out of the blood and then the baby is hangry again, right? Irritated again. We give them more sugar and this whole thing happens. This goes on for a lot of people for their entire lives, from the time they're a baby to they're an adult, which is why we have such a big problem with diabetes and prediabetes and dysglycemia in this country. It's because we use sugar to give us energy, but because the body is very good at pulling sugar out of the blood, we're on this chronic high blood sugar, low blood sugar roller coaster. So when you're in low blood sugar states, in a hypoglycemic state, which follows ingestion of sugar, does that make sense how I said that? Following ingestion of sugar, you go into a low blood sugar state eventually. As that sugar gets pulled out, cortisol kicks in. And that's why you get jittery. When you're hypoglycemic, you may notice that you get jittery when you're hypoglycemic. So cortisol can be elevated not just because of psychological duress, obviously that will do it, but also because of hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, which follows high blood sugar. So there's a relationship between ingestion of sugar and elevated cortisol. Also, chronic inflammation in the body can raise cortisol levels. All of these reasons why cortisol goes up can end up causing hyperpigmentation. There's also a relationship between estrogen and cortisol. So keeping the body relaxed in a relaxed state is also important for reducing hyperpigmentation. There are nutrients that you can use to help protect against excess cortisol, like vitamin E, for example, has a cortisol balancing effect, and vitamin E also has a skin lightening benefit as well. So we find that nutrients that you use that help balance out estrogen, help balance out cortisol, help balance out blood sugar, will all have anti-pigmentation benefits. So the mechanism of action is via the hormones, but using the nutrients at the end of the day can help you with your hyperpigmentation. And then hypothyroidism is another cause of hyperpigmentation. Here's the thing about hypothyroidism. How many of you guys have been diagnosed that way? And if you haven't, I can see there's some people here that hypothyroidism. There's nothing you can do directly for the thyroid. Nothing. There's no nutrients you can take directly for the thyroid, and there are no drugs you can take directly for the thyroid. Synthroid or cytomel or levothyroxine. Okay. The best they can do is give you thyroid hormone, but they can't help you with the thyroid gland. Hormones in the body are supposed to be responsive to the environment. So when you need more energy, for example, your body will make more thyroid hormone. If you're healthy, if you need less, it'll make less thyroid hormone. The hormones are responsive to the environmental needs. So based on what your environment is, the situation you're living in, your hormones are supposed to be responsive. If you just take thyroid hormone, that doesn't help your body be responsive. What you do is you get a big surge in thyroid hormone, then the thyroid hormone goes down, you get another big surge in thyroid hormone. It throws off the body's ability to be responsive, which is really the hallmark sign of the human organism, is that it's responsive to the environment. So thyroid hormone is a very poor answer to a hypothyroid patient or for hypothyroidism. So what do you do to take care of the thyroid? Well, the first thing you want to do to take care of the thyroid is take care of the digestive system. One of the major reasons why people become thyroid is something called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Heard of that or get diagnosed with that? Did they say you have Hashimoto's?
Says I almost have it.
Okay, so what is Hashimoto's? Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid. I remember I said 90% of patients, 80 to 90% of patients who are hypothyroid are women, which immediately tells you there's an estrogen element. So to deal with the thyroid, you got to deal with estrogen. You deal with estrogen by working on the digestive system and by using progesterone. You can also, if you have full-blown iodine deficiency, you might get a goiter. You guys know what that is? You get a big swollen lump in your throat or your neck area. That used to happen a lot, actually, up until about the early 20th century, early part of the 20th century. People had goiters. They would walk around and you'd see them on the street. You never see that anymore because now everybody gets just the right amount of iodine, tiny little bit of iodine through iodized salt. So we don't really have a thyroid problem. We don't really have a goiter problem. However, if you have iodine deficiency, and iodine is mostly found in ocean, it's not really a terrestrial mineral, it's mostly found in the ocean. So if you're not eating seafood, or you're living away from a source of iodine, you may be dealing with an iodine deficiency, but it's not going to be bad enough that it will really affect the thyroid too much. That being said, iodine is very important for the adrenal glands, it's important for the ovaries, it's important for the thyroid, it's important for the breasts. So iodine is a great supplement to take just for women in general. I like a supplement called iodoral, which is a really bioavailable form of iodine.
Ben,
Yes,
you know I don't have a thyroid.
I do know that.
Yeah. So what do we do with that? I mean, I take MP thyroid, which is.
That's a great question. If you don't have a thyroid, and that's like a really severe extreme form of hypothyroidism, you literally don't have a thyroid. What part of the body is picking up the slack? You have two energy sources, two energy systems in the body. The thyroid gives you energy. Thyroid hormone gives energy to all the cells under normal circumstances. Thyroid hormone makes your heart cells heart, makes your muscle cells muscle, makes your skin cells skin, makes your spleen cells spleen. It turns all cells on. So without a thyroid, you're not making any thyroid hormone. You have a secondary system for energy generation, for driving cellular energy. What is that? Cortisol, the adrenal glands, right? So you're right, but you know that you had that history of the high blood pressure and all that. So you're going to be hypercortisol. So because you're running on cortisol energy versus thyroid energy. So what do? You have to be very, very, very kind and loving to your body. Very kind, because you're already running on stress hormones. So anything you do to relax the body is very important. Slow, deep breathing, meditation, any kind of mental strategies, anything you can do to just keep your body in a calm and relaxed state. And it's important for everybody, but it's going to be extra important for you without a thyroid. And if you ever run into somebody who has had their thyroid removed, 500,000 of them are removed every year, you're not alone. That's one of the more common, along with gallbladder removal, is one of the more common surgical procedures that we have. I think it's like the second or third in terms of surgical procedures. Did you have some question here?
So what else do we do to help the thyroid?
There's a couple things. First of all, balance out estrogen. And there's a lot of things you could do for that. Progesterone, we talked about that earlier.
I just started that, actually.
What's that?
Progesterone.
Progesterone can be helpful for that. And then intestinal health. I don't know if I ever told you about the triangle of disease. Did I ever talk to you about the triangle of disease? The triangle of disease, this is something I just noticed from seeing so many people like chronic diseases, are 3 points of bodily breakdown that occur underneath all other health challenges. So heart disease, cancer, autoimmunity, neurological diseases, these are all secondary to 3 points of bodily breakdown that underlie everything. And if you try to treat heart disease or cancer or Parkinson's disease or Bell's palsy or dementia or any other autoimmune challenges, any other health issue without addressing the triangle of disease, it's not going to work because this triangle underlies everything the way roots underlie the leaves of a tree. So our diseases that we consider diseases are really like leaves. And you can't fix a leaf without fixing, or fruit, if you will, without working on the soil and the root. The triangle of disease, these 3 points of bodily breakdown function like roots or like soil underneath the fruits. Your diseases are fruits. The 3 points of bodily breakdown are the roots that lead to the diseased leaves or fruits. So what are these 3 points? These 3 points are really interesting because they break down sequentially starting when we're babies for most people, and that's the digestive system, specifically the intestine, which is SIBO, which we talked about. You always want to consider SIBO behind every single health challenge, especially skin diseases. Always want to consider SIBO as the first point on the triangle of disease that leads to all other health challenges, including acne, psoriasis, eczema, dry skin, hyperpigmentation, rashes and dermatitis, rosacea. Any skin disease, and as well as all other health challenges, should first be treated as an intestinal problem. The good news about the triangle of disease is if you work on these 3 points, starting with the digestive system, everything will fall into place. All the other disease states will begin to improve on their own. So the first point is the digestive system, and for most of us in this room, and especially our patients, it started very early. You know, when a baby's born, they come out of the birth canal and they're bathed with a coating of bacteria, right? You guys all have babies, you know, baby gets coated with a coating of bacteria, and that bacteria then go into the baby's nose and into the baby's mouth, and they go down the baby's down through the baby's digestive tract, and they implant in the intestine, the large intestine, and from that point forward, those bacteria become that baby's and that child and then that adult's best health friends. Those bacteria, which we now call the microbiome, are responsible for making vitamins and for communicating to the cells of the digestive system and the immune system and the brain. And they have this amazing, wide-ranging role to play in terms of biochemical functioning of the body. Not only that, but they also function as a source of genetic material. You know, in fact, most of our genetic material doesn't come from us, it comes from these bacteria. These bacteria actually will contribute genes for us to make protein. So this integration that occurs with this completely separate life form that lives inside of us, that has nothing to do with us, but is integrated biochemically with how our body functions. However, if that baby is not coated with that coating, that baby is immediately compromised in terms of their health. And we know that 30% of babies are born cesarean section. Over 30% of babies are born cesarean section. If you're born cesarean section, you don't get that coating. And it's worse for people who are our age, in their 50s and 60s and 70s, because we didn't even know about that. Now they're starting to understand that that bacterial coating and having a normal vaginal birth is important. But in the 1950s and 1960s and even 1970s, they didn't know that. So they would just routinely do cesarean sections, and many of your patients, in fact, probably some of you guys, were born cesarean section, and you were deprived of that bacterial coating, which means your health was compromised from day one. Then, as the baby gets older, the baby starts to exhibit signs of discomfort at the level of the intestine. We call that colicky, right? Colicky comes from the word colon. And one of the things that we are conditioned to do to our babies when they are colicky is we give them sugar. And sugar calms the baby down for a little bit. And then, as we talked about earlier, the body pulls the sugar out, and then we give more sugar. You end up with this high blood sugar, low blood sugar roller coaster. And the second point in the triangle of disease, after digestive health issues, is dysglycemia. And just like everybody who's got a chronic health challenge is going to have some kind of condition at the level of the intestine, whether it's SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or leaky gut, intestinal permeability, or some kind of digestive health challenge, there's also dysglycemia, which is undiagnosed. Because we diagnose dysglycemia, we diagnose disturbances in blood sugar based on a metric, on a number, which is why people will exhibit all of the signs of messed up blood sugar, whether it's weight problems or skin problems or fatigue issues or hyperpigmentation. And the doctor will say, well, your blood sugar is normal, right? But you can look at them and you can see that they're dysglycemic, that their blood sugar is messed up. That's because blood sugar or diabetes is assessed by a number, 120 milligrams of sugar per deciliter. If you have 120 milligrams of sugar per deciliter, per tenth of a liter of blood, you are considered to be diabetic. But if you have 119.99999, you're not. So there's this arbitrary cutoff point that some people aren't getting to, but blood sugar is still messed up. So they're not diagnosed as a diabetic. They think everything's fine, which, by the way, is you're pre-diabetic. That's what now they have an adjustment they made. They call pre-diabetes. So that's about 100 to 120 fasting blood sugar. But you can still be dysglycemic without being diagnosed as a diabetic. Also, it's not just blood sugar that's the problem. It's also the hormone insulin. Insulin is a growth substance. Just like I said earlier, how estrogen makes things happen, so does insulin. Insulin is a growth substance. When I first moved to Colorado, I was weightlifting in a gym in Boulder. They were bodybuilders actually injecting insulin into their bodies. They weren't diabetics, but the insulin would make their muscles bigger. And they want to get bigger. Insulin makes things grow. It makes things divide. Sometimes farmers, historically, I don't know if they still do, they'll give their cattle insulin to make them grow, to make them fatter, to make them bigger. So just because your insulin or your blood sugar is normal, that doesn't mean that your insulin's not high. If your insulin is high, that's going to create its own health challenges, including hyperpigmentation, including inflammatory health challenges, and your blood sugar could be normal. Does that make sense? How your insulin's high to control your blood sugar, and nobody's checking insulin. They always check blood sugar, but they don't check insulin. So that's the second point of the triangle of disease. If you just work on those 2 points, For all of your health challenges, whether they're skin
So
in your
insulin's
practice,
number 2.
blood sugar and insulin, dysglycemia. And then number 3 is the adrenal glands. That's the tip of the triangle. And because of the relationship between the adrenals and the thyroid, right? Your adrenals give you emergency energy. Your thyroid glands give you regular energy. When your adrenal glands, because you're under a lot of duress, are pumping out cortisol, eventually your thyroid will slow down. Let's get that? When you're under a lot of adrenal duress, whether it's psychological duress or whether it's some kind of inflammatory duress inside of your body, your thyroid will slow down to compensate. And hyperadrenalism leads to hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism is the jumping off point to all other health challenges. And what makes it work, because the thyroid regulates everything. So once you're hypothyroid, you're more prone towards heart disease, you're more prone towards cancer, you're more prone towards autoimmunity, you're more prone towards neurological problems. The whole gamut of health challenges follow hypothyroidism. In fact, if you do have a chronic health challenge, like something like a lupus or MS or Parkinson's or Bell's palsy or whatever, you can assume you're hypothyroid. You don't even need to check your hypothyroidism because the thyroid regulates everything. What makes matters worse, and this is where it gets really unfortunately problematic, is the thyroid also regulates the digestive system. So when you're hypothyroid, you're going to have digestive problems, which is going to lead to more blood sugar problems, which is going to lead to more thyroid problems, which is going to lead to more digestive problems. You end up with this downward spiral of breakdown. And unless you address those 3 points, you're not going to be able to handle any other disease state. And that's pretty much in a nutshell why our medical model can't deal with chronic diseases. You know, we have this medical model that's wonderful for stitching things back on your body or closing things up or repairing bones. We call that heroic medicine. And the medical model excels at heroic medicine. But it's a failure at dealing with chronic degenerative disease. Why? Because it's not addressing these 3 fundamental points. So the doctor will tell you there's no cure for your Parkinson's. There's no cure for your Alzheimer's disease. There's no cure for your multiple sclerosis. But if you work on the triangle of disease, particularly the digestive system, the most amazing recoveries can happen. There was this doctor, Dr. Terry Walls. She had multiple sclerosis, which is a classic autoimmune disease. And like all autoimmune diseases, it has to do with intestinal health and leaky gut and histamine release and all kinds of toxicity that enters into the bloodstream. Well, she wrote a book called The Walls Protocol, detailing her protocol for completely curing herself of this incurable disease called multiple sclerosis. She's a medical doctor, and she did everything that I was telling you here today. Work on your digestive system and work on your blood sugar system and work on the adrenal thyroid complex. So what does it all have to do with skin? It's all related. Anytime you have a skin problem, you have a health problem. And that's if I had on my gravestone, that is going to be my epitaph. It's that skin problems are health problems. You can't just treat the skin without treating the health of the body. Acne, psoriasis, eczema, rosacea, dry skin, hyperpigmentation, whatever. These are health issues. And yes, dry skin is a health issue. The most benign sounding skin problems are health problems. And yes, you guys are estheticians and you're supposed to be studying the skin and helping people with their skin, but the skin can't be separated from the rest of the body. So you have to understand the biochemistry. You have to understand the hormone system. You have to understand how the glands work. If you're going to, thank you so much. If you're going to be an effective esthetician, and today's modern esthetician has to be a well-rounded healthcare professional, and it should be. Because you can save somebody's life. If you treat their hyperpigmentation by treating their estrogen, you can actually prevent them from getting cancer later down the road. If you control somebody's blood sugar, work on their acne or their PCOS by working on their blood sugar, you can save somebody from having diabetes further on down the road. We have so much power as skincare professionals if we really take it on. Most estheticians aren't going to want to do that, but today's modern medical esthetician has that ability to do that if he or she wants. And I personally believe that we should all be doing that as skincare professionals. We already talked a lot about these nutritional solutions. Renee loves this. That's why she stuck this on here. I have always thought that a smart business lady esthetician should carry nutritional supplements. And one of the most important is Udo's Blend. Why? Udo's Blend is essential fatty acids. Essential fatty acids are, just as the name said, essential. They're very difficult to find in food. And most people who are not going to who aren't supplementing with essential fatty acids are going to be deficient. Essential fatty acids act like natural estrogen. They have a natural estrogenic effect. So they give you the estrogenic the benefits of estrogen without the toxicity associated with estrogen. Essential fatty acids are the cure for dry skin. Dry skin can be caused by essential fatty acid deficiency. Essential fatty acids are the cure for fat cravings. If for people who are craving fat, essential fatty acids can cut into your fat cravings. You probably noticed that with your fat cravings. And then essential fatty acids, particularly omega-3 essential fatty acids, are very protective for the skin, especially from the sun. And by the way, EMF from cell phones or from electropollution, omega-3 fatty acids are stored in the skin where they have sun protective and EMF protective benefits. It's very difficult to get from food. I like Udo's blend because I know Udo. I've known him for many years. He wrote a book called Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, which is the Bible of fats. If you ever want to have a reference library in your office, or if you want to learn more about fats, it's very easy to read, but it is considered to be the Bible of fats. And Udo's oil or Udo's blend has all the essential fatty acids, 2 main essential fatty acids in it. It's organic, and it's a very, very nice product.
Ben,
Yes.
why are we, I'm always curious about the 6 and 9.
Yeah, 9 is not in this. The word essential, you've heard, like an essential nutrient, you've heard the word essential, right? What does the word essential mean?
Necessary, die without it.
You die without it. That's basically what it means. Exactly. Your body can't make it, and without it, we'll go into a disease state and then eventually die. There are 2 fatty acids that are found in plants. One is called alpha linoleic acid, and the other is called, it's called linoleic acid. The other is called alpha linolenic acid, LA and ALA. We call them colloquially omega-6 and omega-3. Now, there's lots of different omega-6s and different omega-3s, but the essential ones are LA and ALA. Omega-9 is not an essential fatty acid. It's a good one and has wonderful anti-inflammatory properties. It's found in olives, and it's nice to have, but it's not essential.
What about 7?
It's not essential either, and that's another good one, palmitoleic acid. So there's only two that you must have, or you will exhibit. This is how they determine whether a nutrient is essential or not. If you exhibit effects, toxicity effects, without that nutrient, it's said to be essential. So there's no toxicity effects associated with the deficiency in omega-7 or omega-9, but there are toxicity effects associated with deficiencies in omega-3 and omega-6, or more properly, LA and ALA. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I hear that we get enough like omega-6.
So I'll talk about that in a second. That's another myth. I'll talk about that in a second. So, but did that make sense so far? What I said so far? Okay, so omega-6, which is LA, which for convenience we'll call it LA, and omega-3 we'll call ALA. Those are essential. The reason they're essential is if you don't have them, you'll start to have bodily effects, specifically for the skin, dry skin or inflamed skin. In fact, if you want to induce rashes and dry skin and sensitive skin in a laboratory animal, you take out the ALA and the LA from the diet. So the skin is very, very responsive to supplementation and very responsive to lack of LA and ALA. That's one of the fastest things that you'll notice, or quickest things that you'll notice in deficiency states, is dry, sensitive, crusty, rashy skin, which how many of your patients have, right? How many of your patients are just simply manifesting the signs of deficiencies? Now, you asked something very interesting, and there is this myth that people get a lot of omega-6s. Have you heard this? Not to worry about omega-6s, you get a lot of them, and you don't want to take more of them because you get so many of them. What they're confusing is the fact that we eat a lot of oils in this country that are rich in omega-6 in their natural state. However, we don't eat oils in their natural state. We cook with our oils. We process our oils. We heat our oils. We do all kinds of things to destroy the omega-6s. So even though we're getting corn oil and safflower oil and sesame oil and all the oils that should have omega-6s in them, we're still not getting the omega-6, the LA, even though we're eating those oils. So they're right, half right in the sense that we're eating the oils, but we're not getting the omegas. And most of the omegas, or most of the essential fatty acids in your body, is of the LA variety, omega-6 variety. Omega-3s are sprinkled like a condiment, like salt on on French fries, if I could use that metaphor. The omega-3s are like a condiment compared to the omega-6s. Most of the fats in your body and most of the fats in your skin are omega-6 fats, LA fats. So there's a much, much greater need for LA than there is ALA. That being said, ALA has a calming effect. ALA has an anti-inflammatory effect. LA has an inflammatory effect. And this is another reason why sometimes people who only know a little bit about nutrition will say, well, LA is inflammatory. We don't want, have you heard this? We don't want to have that. Well, what they're missing is inflammation is required for healing. You can't heal without inflammation. Inflammation is a good thing. The problem isn't inflammation. The problem is too much inflammation. So the inflammatory response precedes healing. You can't heal without the inflammatory response. So if anybody says LA is inflammatory, that's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if there's too much inflammation. Inflammation is controlled via, or is mediated via LA. Linoleic acid is involved in the inflammatory response. Number one, inflammation is important. Inflammation is not a bad thing. In fact, inflammation is your best friend. We want to really understand that because we hear about inflammation all the time and we're led to believe that it's some kind of horrible thing that goes wrong in our body. It's not. What is inflammation anyway? Does anybody know? You hear it all the time. Well, that's one of its characteristics is heat. In fact, if you go to medical school, they say dolor, calor, rubor, and tumor. Dolor means pain, calor means heat, rubor means redness, tumor means swelling. Those are the four cardinal signs of inflammation. Dolor, calor, rubor, and tumor. Those are the characteristics. But what is inflammation? Why does the body inflame? What's going on? Inflammation is a protective response. It's like an airbag or an air cast. You ever break your leg and they put an air cast around your leg or around your knee or around? You ever see those air casts? Is that yes or no? Yes. You guys getting TMI yet? Let's try to get that little look. What's that?
No, we have to pee.
Oh yes, we have to go to the bathroom. Hey, let me just say this real quick, and then we're almost done here, so then we'll wind down. How you guys doing, by the way?
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So inflammation is the way the body protects itself. Like you say, you get a black eye, right? That's swelling, and that swelling and the redness and the pain, the discomfort, and the heat are like an airbag protecting your orbital bone from damage. So inflammation is a way the body creates a wall around damaged tissue so the tissue can heal. And the way it works is once the inflammatory chemistry kicks in, that wall kicks in, that triggers an anti-inflammatory response. And the anti-inflammatory response is dependent on inflammation. Without inflammation, you can't have anti-inflammation. They lead into each other, and this is kind of how the way the body works in general. One thing leads to another. If you block inflammation, you're not going to get anti-inflammation. So inflammation triggers the healing response. First, you get protection, then you get healing. And so inflammation is a very important part of the body. And actually, there's two kinds of inflammation. There's the kind of inflammation we see, like if you break your leg or you sprain your ankle or you get a black eye, you'll see that inflammation. But there's a sneakier, more insidious kind of inflammation that's really behind all of our chronic degenerative disease processes, behind hyperpigmentation, behind skin diseases, and that's micro-inflammation. That's inflammation that's invisible, that's microscopic, but eventually it builds up enough so that it triggers into, it initiates symptoms. And that's why you'll see some people or hear some people say, I was just at home watching TV and all of a sudden I got arthritis. You know? I was just minding my own business and I was fine yesterday and all of a sudden, like the arthritis angel just shot a little arthritis arrow at her or something. Because we don't see the micro-inflammatory processes that are underneath the radar until it reaches a critical mass. And then all of a sudden you say, oh my gosh, I have endometriosis, I have fibromyalgia, I have acne, whatever it is. It's because it seems like it's sudden because we didn't see the micro-inflammatory response that was occurring over the course of the months and the years and even the decades or even the whole lifetime at the cellular level until it reaches a critical mass. And so micro-inflammation is behind all health challenges. In fact, all diseases are inflammatory in nature. All chronic diseases are inflammatory in nature. They're a sign, and this is really important, think about it. If inflammation is a protective response, right? And all diseases are inflammatory in nature. What is that telling us about diseases? They're the end result of protection.
So when they say that sugar causes inflammation,
Why would sugar cause inflammation?
so that's your body protecting itself?
It's protecting itself from the damage caused by the sugar. See, sugar burns hot. Remember I said it burns
Right.
hot.
Right.
And sugar will react with things to burn them, like blood vessels, just to give you one little example. Sugar will cause blood vessels to burn. That's called glycation. Heard that term? Glycation, right? That glycation will initiate an inflammatory response. Damaged tissue causes the body to want to protect it. It sequesters that damaged tissue so that damaged tissue doesn't get any more damage. It's like an airbag.
So I have another question. So if you have an injury, like I have an injury in my knee and I have a stretched ligament. So
The body's protecting it. There's probably
my
inflammation.
doctor says take anti-inflammatories. Another surgeon has said to me, do not take
Exactly.
anti-inflammatories.
The surgeon's right. Because the inflammation is necessary to initiate the healing response.
Okay.
See, this is the problem we have with anti-inflammatories. You know, anti-inflammatory medications are responsible for a lot of health challenges. In fact, one of the leading causes of or one of the leading sources of drug toxicity is anti-inflammatories like Motrin and Tylenol and aspirin and Tylenol. So the surgeon was right. He knew that the inflammation will lead to the anti-inflammation. The doctor didn't know that. The surgeon probably knew that because he's probably dealing with a lot.
They're both surgeons.
Oh, they're both surgeons.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually the second one. The second one's right. Yes, you want the inflammation to occur so anti-inflammation can follow, right?
That's with stem cell.
Now, stem cells are a whole other thing. Stem cells work by, yes, stem cells initially would be inflammatory, but that would initiate. There's actually something called prolotherapy. You ever hear of prolotherapy? Prolotherapy is when you ever hear of prolotherapy? They'll actually inject something inflammatory into your body, and that will initiate an anti-inflammatory response.
The surgeon who said do not take anti-inflammatories.
Yeah.
He also recommended taking something like a hammer, banging, causing injury.
Now you know the
so
logic.
that
Now,
your body can come in and heal.
now he's only half right though,
Okay.
because you got to make sure you have the nutrients present for
Right.
healing to ensue. So you got to make sure you have protein. You got to make sure you have your B vitamins. You got to make sure you have your copper and your magnesium, all your nutrients, so the anti-inflammatory response can ensue. You'll trigger it with your hammer or prolotherapy, but you got to make sure that there's raw materials to fuel it in order to sustain it. If you just hammer it without having the vitamin E and the magnesium and the copper and all the nutrients, there's not going to be any raw materials to sustain the anti-inflammatory response, right? So you got to make sure that you're well nutrited.
Right.
You're a well-oiled machine.
I'm not hammering myself.
No, you're not. Okay, so these are important nutrients that are involved with skin protection and also sun protection. Colored vegetables are especially important. As women age, as we all age, but especially as women, we don't absorb our fats. Women don't absorb their fats as effectively. The best way to protect yourself from the sun, one of the best ways, is colored veggies, the reds, the blues, and the greens, and the yellows. But the reds, the blues, and the greens, and the yellows, these pigments are fatty. So if you're not absorbing your fats, if you have an intestinal problem, if you have a liver problem, if you don't have a gallbladder, you have a gallbladder problem, you may not absorb the pigments, which means your skin is going to be more sensitive to the sun. So if that's the case, or even if you just want to make sure that you're absorbing the pigments, braise your broccoli in butter before you eat it, and the pigments will come out in the butter, or coconut oil, or some kind of fat, so the pigments are released from the plant or from the vegetable, and it makes it easier for your body to absorb. All of these are sun protective and detoxification supplements. Let's see what it stands out. Reducing sugar, we talked about EFAs, niacin. All these are nutritional strategies for people who are dealing with hormone issues. For treatment, how are we doing for time, by the way?
We have like
20 minutes?
mhm.
Do you guys want to run to the bathroom? I want you to run to the bathroom, come back, and we'll talk about topical strategies and topical products. But don't take too long. We're going to run out of time. What's that? There's one downstairs.
There's one else.
Do you know where it is? How you doing? They go crazy with it, and that is indeed one of the classic signs of pellagra. If you go to medical school, they call it 4 Ds of pellagra. Diarrhea affects your GI system. Dermatitis affects your skin. Dementia, and one of the signs of pellagra or niacin deficiency is dementia, and then ultimately death. They call it 4 Ds of pellagra. And you got to wonder how many times do you confront patients who have dermatitis and you can't figure out what it's being caused from. It could be a niacin deficiency. Considering people aren't supplementing, it could easily be a niacin deficiency. Or they're not getting enough protein. Niacin is found in high protein foods. How about people who have dementia? Did you ever check for niacin levels? No. Give somebody niacin. And just because... Yeah, real quick. And you may just have, like I was saying earlier, thiamine also causes dementia and psychosis, but you may just have mild thiamine or mild niacin deficiency, and then you're just forgetful, or you're just confused, or you're just have emotional instability or manic depressive disorder. All of these could simply be a thiamine deficiency or a niacin deficiency, because we know that they're associated with brain health and mental health. I'm sorry, Roxanne.
No, just, as estheticians, what is our scope of practice, I guess, as far as making dietary recommendations?
Anything you can do dietary recommendations till the cows come home. What you
Okay.
can't do is you can't diagnose.
So when you say
But remember, let me just say this real quick. When we say diagnose, that means you can't use a brand name.
Okay,
Dysglycemia, you can say.
okay.
I think you may have dysglycemia. I think you may be hypercortisol. I think you may have hyperadrenalism, hypothyroidism. These are not diagnoses.
I asked what that means.
Okay, well, you have to explain the biochemistry of it, but the point is you can't say multiple sclerosis, but you could say neural inflammation,
Okay.
right? In other words, you can't say the brand name, but you can talk about the biochemistry. And you can talk about dietary nutritional protocols all day long. You can even, you can even suggest drugs, but you can't really, obviously, you can't dispense or recommend or break the drugs. Yes.
when you say you want us to digest as estheticians, the digestion, blood sugar, adrenals, and a client says, well, okay, what do you want me to do about my digestion?
Perfect question. Thank you so much. First thing you want to do is you want to have a client do a food diary, always. And it always helps to have them fast before they do a food diary. A food diary is when you write down everything you ate, and then how you feel or how your skin looks or how your mental attitude or whatever your symptoms are afterwards. What this does is, first of all, it vests your client in the healing process. You always want your client vested in healing. You want them to be part of the healing process. You want them to see that what they're doing is having an effect on their skin, and that's very empowering. If you just have a rash and you don't know, where the hell, how do I have this rash? Where's it coming from? It's very disempowering, especially if you get it chronically. But if you say, every time I have bread, I break out, or every time I have beans, I get zits or whatever, you'll start to see the impact of your choices, your lifestyle choices on your health challenge. That is so empowering. Have you ever had a health challenge and you don't know what the heck it's coming from? That's the most frustrating thing for people. If you look in the mirror and breaking out and you don't know why, you look at another zit. What the heck's going on? But then if you do a food diary, you'll see every time I have cereal, or every time I have avocados, or every time I have eggplant, or every time I have broccoli, or every time I have pears, this happens. It creates a sense that I have some control over how my body is showing up. So number one, you're vesting your client. They're vetted, they're vested in their healing process. Number two, they become empowered. They see the connection. And then number three, you look good. You're like a hero to them. You're like, oh my God, she knows exactly what she's talking about. So there's multiple benefits to doing a food diary. It always helps to fast before you do a food diary.
So 24 hours.
24-hour fast. If you do a 24-hour fast, what happens is your symptoms become more prominent. If you are chronically getting gas after you eat a certain food, you don't even notice it anymore. If you chronically feel tired after you eat certain foods, you don't even pay attention. You don't make that connection. The brain only notices things that happen once in a while. Things that happen all the time go underneath the radar. So by fasting first, you create a contrast or a prominence to your symptoms. And so I always recommend before food diaries a fast. First you fast, then do a food diary, then you do what's called the elimination diet, where you start eliminating foods. And you don't go by what you think is a good food, because a lot of foods that are supposed to be good for people can be bad for you. So that's why a food diary is so important. Blood sugar is really easy. I mean, it's simple, but it's not so easy. But you got to let people know there's hidden sources of sugar. So people don't realize that potatoes are sugar. People don't realize necessarily that rice is sugar, or that cereal grains are sugar. So you got to kind of point that out to people. But the first thing is the digestive system, and that goes a long way towards helping everything else with food problems. And I always feel a little uncomfortable talking about food because people people feel really attached to their foods. And so you don't want to attack somebody for their foods, and you don't want to remove the source of pleasure that they have. You know, people get pleasure out of it. Sometimes they don't have great lives, but they get the one source of pleasure they have in their life is their foods. So you got to be a little bit careful with that, but at the same time, you want to let people know that if you have a health challenge, whether it's a skin health challenge or it's an inflammatory challenge or an autoimmune challenge, this represents a point of power. This represents tremendous leverage that you have over how your biochemistry works. And when you think about it, our body is a closed system. In physics, you have two kinds of systems. In biology, you have closed. In the physics of the body, you have a closed system. Closed system is like a circle, no openings. An open system has openings in it. The body's a closed system, and it runs perfectly well unless it's disturbed. And there's one major source of disturbance into this closed system. There's one opening into the closed system. What is that opening into the closed system of the body? The mouth, obviously, right? So it's not like I'm Mr. Organic guy and David Avocado Wolf and I'm not. It's not what it's about. It's about this is a point of power because it's a portal into the body. Food is medicine in the sense that it's changing our biochemistry. There's two major ways our biochemistry changes. One is through our thoughts, and the other is through our food. And so this represents a major point of biochemical control. Is the kind of foods we eat. And when you think about it, the foods we eat today didn't exist on the African savanna. Not only that, they didn't even exist 150 years ago. Do you realize almost everything we eat today did not exist a mere 150 years ago or 100 years ago? We've completely turned over our food supply. We're now eating food that did not exist 4 or 5 generations ago. Even chicken and beef and fish, it's different today because of the way they're all being farmed and the kind of grains that they're eating or the kind of fertilizers or hormones or things that we're giving the animals. So almost nothing that we're eating today existed the way we eat it today 100 years ago or 150 years ago, a mere 5 or 6 or 7 generations ago. So of course food is going to be a problem. Of course our health challenges that we're subjected to in the year 2024 are going to be related to food because it's a completely different menu that we're ingesting from a mere 100 years ago. So it's not that far of a stretch, but it's really personal. So you got to be a little bit careful, but it does represent a point of power. And if I was sick and I didn't know any of this stuff, I'd be so grateful if somebody would tell me this. That it could be the beans, or it could be the cereal, or it could be the burgers, or whatever it is that we're eating. All right, so we spent a lot of time talking about nutrition, which I absolutely love, obviously. I actually have a radio show where I talk about nutrition if you guys are interested. It's called The Bright Side. And then I also have you heard of The Road Pharmacist? Have you heard of The Road Pharmacist? That's my esthetician show.
You're my hiking podcast.
Am I?
Both of them. I switch back and forth.
Okay, good. You're a smart lady. It's good. All right. So I like to say true skin health is for smart people, right? I formulate products for smart people. I always thought that smart people deserved a brand for themselves that leveraged biochemistry, that took advantage of how the body works and how the skin works inside and out. So truth is for smart people, and the bright side is for smart people too. So thank you for listening. So skin nutrition, we talked about that. Exfoliation is a great strategy, but you just got to be careful because you can induce hyperpigmentation in somebody who's unstable at the level of estrogen or cortisol. There are other techniques for blocking the transfer of melanin into the keratinocyte. That should be that's not a 9. Niacin and soy are both melanin blocking agents. By the way, niacin has sun protective benefits, and niacin also strengthens the skin barrier. A defective skin barrier will lead to hyperpigmentation. A weakened skin barrier will result in hyperpigmentation. So strengthening the stratum corneum is a very important strategy for preventing hyperpigmentation and preventing dry skin and just keeping the skin healthy. And there's lots of ways to do it. One of the best ways to strengthen the skin barrier is with exfoliation. Sometimes I'm still amazed how there's still, healthcare professionals who say don't exfoliate. You may have heard this. Have you ever heard somebody say don't exfoliate? To me, that's just craziness. Because what exfoliation does is it turns everything on, just like going to the gym turns everything on. Somebody who says don't exfoliate might as well say don't go to the gym. Don't lift weights. That's going to hurt your muscles. You're going to tear up those muscles. You don't want to lift weights. You don't want to exercise. And when you're driving to Target, park your car right next to Target. You don't want to walk all the way across the parking lot and hurt your leg muscles, right? I mean, that's the same logic to me. When people say don't exfoliate, to me, they might as well say don't go to the gym and don't exercise. Now, if you're exfoliating, you want to have, like we were saying earlier, if you have inflammation and you're hitting your leg with a hammer, that can stimulate anti-inflammation. And if you exfoliate, that's going to stimulate new cells and build a stronger barrier. But you got to make sure you have your phospholipids, and you got to make sure you have your vitamin A, you got to make sure you have your zinc, you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself so you can take advantage of the exercise. So you can leverage the power of exfoliation. That being said, if you nutriate correctly, you're taking care of your nutritional supplementation, avoiding inflammatory foods like sugar and fried fats. And by the way, fried fats are one of the most pro-inflammatory foods you can ever ingest, especially for the intestine, for people who have ulcerative colitis or leaky gut or any intestinal problems. So you want to stay away from certain things, make sure you're supplementing. Within that context, exfoliation is tremendously valuable for building a strong barrier. Weak barrier will cause hyperpigmentation, or can cause hyperpigmentation. And then there's also drugs, hydroquinone, which is, I have to say, it's effective, but only in high concentrations, but it's nasty, nasty, nasty. I have to make some today. I got to make a hydroquinone for a patient, 8% hydroquinone, and I wear a mask and I wear gloves when I'm doing it. And if you think, if I'm wearing masks and gloves, why does somebody want to rub it on their face? You're probably right, but they do. So who am I to say? That's what they want. At high concentrations, it does work. I have yet to see Kojic work on anybody. I don't know. Have you guys ever seen Kojic work? I think it's just one of the lamest active ingredients there is for hyperpigmentation. Vitamin C can work, especially fat-soluble vitamin C. And then retinol is probably my favorite topical for lightening the skin. You get hydroquinone-like benefits, plus you get all the anti-aging benefits with retinol. We have all kinds. In pharmacy school, we learn a lot about retinoic acid. Retinol is a precursor to retinoic acid. So retinol is a very, very powerful active ingredient, as you probably all know. You want to start your patients off on retinol slowly and build them up. That being said, our retinol serum and even our retinol gel, but especially our retinol serum, gives you a tremendous retinol bang without the inflammation or irritation that retinol can cause. It's a very well formulated product. And as a guy who's been formulating retinol products now for going on 40 years, I can tell you that a lot of the knock on retinol has to do with poorly formulated products as well as unhealthy skin. And the combination of unhealthy skin and poorly formulated products combined leads to a very bad reputation for retinol, which is unfortunate because it is an incredibly valuable anti-aging, skin lightening, and skin barrier strengthening active ingredient. You'll notice in all our retinol products, we always have a big, healthy, robust dose of vitamin C. And that is very unusual in the world of skincare, as you may know, because there's this myth out there that you don't use vitamin C with retinol. Myth, not true. You perhaps do not use ascorbic acid, which is water-soluble vitamin C, with retinol, because ascorbic acid can be irritating to the skin, and retinol can increase the oxidation or speed up the oxidation of retinol, and vice versa. But fat-soluble vitamin C and retinol go together like two peas in a pod. They work together perfectly. And I always put up a whole bunch of vitamin C with my retinols. In fact, our retinol gels are 25% fat-soluble vitamin C, which makes them as much a vitamin C product as they are a retinol product. Have you guys all used our retinol gels and serums?
It was in Fortune 500 magazine.
The retinol is?
Yes, it was.
When was it?
2 months ago. Isn't it Fortune 500, Kristen?
Fortune 500, I didn't know that. Were we in the magazine?
No, you were placed in there.
And Forbes.
Forbes,
Oh,
there you
Forbes?
go.
It was? I didn't know that.
Yep.
We have a
For
copy.
that formulation of that combination.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
What's the difference of these three?
Retinol gel is our original. That's a gel. I personally like the serum better, but a lot of people like the gel. It has a body to it. It feels good on the skin. It's basically retinol, fat-soluble vitamin C, and our transdermal delivery matrix. Resurfix is the retinol gel in a serum, and it's got more vitamins in it. And I think it's a better product personally. But it doesn't have the same body, if you like the body. And then our routine enhancing serum has a small amount of retinol.
Good place to start.
Good place to start, absolutely. Or to bump up your retinol if you're using, say, the serum once a week. In the middle of the week, you can bump up your retinol with a small dose.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Don't forget about the
What's the shelf
fullerenes.
life of the sample?
Oh yeah, I forgot. One of my all-time favorite ingredients that nobody knows about. I like ingredients nobody
attention to
knows
this
about.
one.
Gets me in trouble sometimes, but.
What?
Fullerenes, you guys know about fullerenes? Well, you soon will. Fullerenes are this really unbelievably interesting and elegant and beautiful molecule that's shaped like a soccer ball. Technically, they call it C60 because it's made up of 60 carbon atoms that are symmetrically arranged to create a soccer ball. Like if you ever see a chemical structure, I don't know if you've drawn here, but if you ever see a chemical structure, it'll be like C, C, O, N, it'll be like a long line with little dashes, or sometimes we'll have things sticking out inside. C60 is a soccer ball, and it's perfectly symmetrical. And this soccer ball shape gives C60, which is also known colloquially as fullerenes, very interesting properties. Number one, it supports transdermal delivery. And this is one thing that pharmacists are steeped in when it comes to dermatology. And we study dermatology a lot in pharmacy school. I made it one of my specialties. And that is getting ingredients from the stratum corneum to the basal layer and the fibroblasts. If your active ingredients are not getting to the basal layer where the keratinocytes are, or the fibroblasts are, or somehow activating them, you're wasting your time and your money and your skincare. It's about the basal layer and the melanocytes. So transdermal delivery is very important. Our transdermal delivery matrix has lipids that do that, but our serum has fullerenes that carry all the active ingredients through the stratum corneum to the lower levels of the skin. Plus, it's also one of nature's most powerful antioxidants for reducing irritation. A lot of the irritation that's associated with retinol follows oxidation. So antioxidants are a great way to protect against some of the irritation that can happen with retinol. And I put other antioxidants in there, but the fullerenes support the antioxidant profile. So it allows you to get the retinol benefits without the irritation.
So speaking of David Wolf, he's really big on C60.
Is he? I like David Wolf, and I like his stuff, but I don't want people to think that I'm like him in the sense that I don't tell you what to eat. And, that's not my thing. I'm just saying if you have a skin problem or a health problem, food represents a very powerful strategy, leverage point for you to be able to control your biochemistry. And I just think his name's funny, so I'm saying.
Plus it's all very super expensive too.
C60 is expensive. Yes, it is expensive, but it's active in very small amounts. Transdermal C serum is our flagship product. Yes,
I'm sorry.
no problem.
Do you do anything with tranexamic acid?
Tranexamic acid? Tranexamic acid is just, I'm not a fan. I have it downstairs. I use it sometimes with prescription. No, I haven't seen, again, if the skin wants to pigment, it's going to pigment. Tranexamic acid is a tyrosinase inhibitor. It got a lot of buzz because a drug company came up with the model. I forgot if it was Allergan, or I forgot the drug company that did it. So it got a lot of buzz for a little bit. It's still out there. I haven't seen great results with it. Have you?
I do have one product that I really like.
Is it it might be the product, but is it just tranexamic acid? Or
No, it's a,
has a lot of
Yeah.
things in it. Yeah, it's hard to say. I haven't seen great results for tranexamic acid, and I do use it sometimes on a prescription, but it's not. I put it along the lines of kojic acid. Tyrosinase inhibition is the classic strategy for depigmentizing the skin. Tyrosinase is an enzyme that is involved in the production of melanin. But like I was saying earlier, because pigmentation is so fundamental to survival, it's very difficult to control inflammation by simply controlling tyrosinase, which is why tyrosinase inhibition is not the best way to depigmentize the skin unless you have a major drug like hydroquinone. So I haven't seen great results with tranexamic acid or any tyrosinase inhibitors, to tell you the truth, even though that's the standard way of depigmentizing. I have seen some good results with another way of depigmentizing the skin, which we'll talk about here in a second. Transdermal C serum has skin lightening properties. It's 5 ingredients. It's minimalist. It's almost 80% fat soluble vitamin C. It has all the benefits of vitamin C, including skin lightening or mineral exfoliant. I'm not going to talk too much about these products. Have you guys all used our products? Our AHA energizing mineral exfoliator. I will say this one thing. I like underappreciated ingredients. I'm always looking for ingredients that aren't being taken advantage of. One of the most underappreciated ingredients, in my opinion, topically as well as internally, is nature's most powerful antioxidants that come from the earth. And that is minerals, plant-derived ionic minerals, minerals that dissolve in water. Minerals under ordinary circumstances don't dissolve in water. If you go to the garden out there and pull some rocks out from the garden and put it in a glass of water, the rocks are not going to dissolve, right? But if you take minerals that have been processed, pre-processed by plants, plants have an ability to turn those minerals that don't dissolve in water into soluble minerals. Water dissolvable minerals that now dissolve in water. And the interaction between water molecules and these mineral molecules, or more properly element molecules, creates an electronic milieu that has multiple benefits for the skin. Number one, it acts like an oxygen carrier. So it supports oxygenation of the tissue. And at the same time, it scavenges oxygen. And that's this is all, by the way, our fulvic minerals. And that we have them in capsules as well as in our HA energizing exfoliator. And the fact that it scavenges oxygen and delivers oxygen makes it a perfect base for alpha hydroxy acids. The oxygen in combination with the alpha hydroxy acids gets delivered more effectively to the lower levels of the skin. And the antioxidant properties of the minerals make take the bite out of the alpha hydroxy acids. So you get a nice low pH around 3-ish or so with our HA energizing exfoliator, but it doesn't have the same bite that you would expect from ordinary alpha hydroxy acids because the base is minerals, fulvic minerals, plant-derived minerals. And we use fulvic minerals and plant-derived minerals as a base for a lot of our skin peel products. Also, fulvic minerals, of course, are nutriating and they improve penetration. They're transdermal penetrants. So they improve penetration of sodium PCA and other active ingredients, high hyaluronic acid exfoliator. And this is what I was telling you before. This is our PYT, pretty young thing. PYT, has anybody used PYT? PYT was originally designed as a non-tyrosinase inhibiting, non-hydroquinone skin lightener for private parts. And when I first heard about it, I started making it for a gal who about maybe 15 years ago, she said, Ben, I need an anal bleaching cream. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And she said, yep, it's now a thing. And so I said, but you can't really put hydroquinone down there, you know? So I thought about it, and this is how I came out with this PYT, and it ended up becoming the #1 anal bleaching cream in the country, maybe even in the world. I saw a lot of it. And then we started to experiment with it, and it turns out it lightens everything. So it's not just we market it as a general skin lightener, anal bleaching cream, but also lightens other dark spots. I think you were telling me it lightens inflammatory hyperpigmentation, but it doesn't work as a tyrosinase inhibitor. It has a very interesting hormonal effect. It blocks the hormones that are responsible for initiating pigment. Pigmentation actually starts, or the pigmentation process, I should say, starts in your brain. There are hormones that go from the pituitary gland in the brain to the melanocytes in your skin. And this hormone is specifically called melanocyte-stimulating hormone. And this melanocyte-stimulating hormone is blocked by one of our peptides that are in the PYT. There's also another hormone called transforming growth factor beta. You don't need to know necessarily the name. Transforming growth factor beta has an inhibitory effect on melanocytes. And our second peptide blocks TGF beta, transforming growth factor beta. And those skin lightening effects are non-tyrosinase inhibiting, although there's a little tyrosinase inhibition, but it mostly works with hormones that are responsible for stimulating the production of, or stimulating the proliferation and the growth of melanocytes. And it works pretty darn well. I was surprised. This is the mechanism, if you guys care. The sun hits hits the skin, turns on melanocyte stimulating hormone, which in turn turns on MCR1. We block it right at this level here. So it's basically a hormone block. This is a prescription product. Do we have his picture on here?
Yes.
Have his pictures on here? So, we have a pharmacy downstairs, right? And a lot of the products that I sell through the pharmacy. I don't sell as part of Truth. But this, and I wasn't going to include any of these here, but this one works so darn well that I just put it on here. It is only available by prescription, not through the pharmacy. You don't need a prescription for it, but through the pharmacy. And it has unbelievable healing effects for the skin. And that's the reason why we included this. It's back here.
How's it compared to your Omega-6?
It's probably for healing and soothing the skin. It's probably Probably better than the omega-6.
It also-
The omega-6 is more for epithelia. This is more anti-redness for healing. But you can see, this was Eva. Do you guys know Eva? This is Eva, and this is
Immediately
the
after.
next day after the post-healing.
This was the, a CO2 fractional laser. Mhm. Not on a high setting, on a lower setting. And there was another one following this one with the,
Like a cool peel where it is, or like a total like for the CO2, you know?
um,
I don't think it's totally related. It's not ablation. It was not ablation.
no,
No, it's just the surface. But you can see the redness is pretty dramatic, goes away pretty dramatically. And it speeds healing.
sunburn?
It works on sunburn too. Any kind of redness. Sunburn's the same thing, basically.
Dawn needs.
Vascular.
Not
Do you- Oh, you. Do you
sunburn.
get some?
Yeah.
I might have a little bit. I might have a little bit.
I might need more, a little bit.
What did you do? You lay out?
No.
Bikini?
She was out in the snow, while it was
Okay.
snowing, snowed out.
Were you scared?
No, I was
Skiing
in
in a
hot springs.
bikini.
These are our 5D
Maybe not
neutrophils.
anymore.
Have you guys, anybody used our 5D neutrophils? The 5D neutrophils are 5D because they're made with, I always thought that peeling is a golden opportunity to dose the skin with nutrients. Obviously, I'm into nutrition, and I think skin nutrition is the most important topical ingredient. So I always thought, why aren't people's peels packed with nutrition? It's a great opportunity to put nutrition in the skin. So our 5D peels are made with our ionic minerals, our plant-derived minerals, vitamins, amino acids, various biogenic ingredients, and a whole full spectrum of fruit acids. Or glycolic has lactic, it has citric, it has malic, or lactic has glycolic, and citric, and malic. So you get a well-rounded peeling agent, and you don't get the irritation because of the polyelectrolytes and the vitamins. Here's some peel guidelines. I'm going to slip through. Oh, Jesner's. You guys do Jesner's peels? Jesner's peels are a great peel for hyperpigmentation. In fact, I think Jesner might be the best peel for hyperpigmentation. You get salicylic acid, which is a depigmentizing agent, and then you also get resorcinol, which is very similar to hydroquinone. So resorcinol is a hydroquinone-like skin lightener. Jesner's is layered. It's also great for scars, for helping improve the appearance of scars. It's anti-acne. This is a nice Jesner's peel that Renee did. It's a little peeling. You get to see what that does. That's pretty awesome. And this protocol. And then our TCA peel. I love the TCA peel. The TCA peel at low strengths, 10 and 20% TCA, can be used almost like a toner, like a daily peel, or like a couple times a week peel. Carrie, how often do you use TCA 10%?
Once, I'm spot treating, but I probably use it once every 2 weeks now,
Yes, so
10%.
TCA you can use pretty frequently, 10,
You can
20,
probably do it once a week if you have good conditioned skin.
10%.
Yeah, 10%.
10%. I would do 20
No.
once a week. Now TCA 40% or 30%, there's some serious downtime with that. That's a very intense peel. But 10 and 20% is a nice, 10% especially is a nice first time peel. Yes.
I also think just very important to point out, because these TCAs are formulated by them, they are not created equal to
Yeah.
your other TCAs in the market. I've seen some major feeling and results done with that 20%.
20% you get a nice, yeah, you can get a
You
nice
know,
peel.
where a lot of people are like, yeah, I use a 40% TCA, and they're not all created equal. So just keep that in mind when treating with this, because it's an awesome peel.
Especially for hyperpigmentation.
Yeah.
Our growth factor elixir. Yay, how many guys use growth factor elixir? Growth factor elixir is a post, are you seeing it, Dawn? Did you get it? A post,
Try that.
post,
It's amazing.
yeah, it's for post laser and post microneedling. Any kind of post treatment when you want to have access, where you have access to the cells. Growth factors typically aren't going to get through the stratum corneum. But once you breach the stratum corneum, you have a golden opportunity to get growth factors into the skin. Our growth factor elixir is made with peptides, growth factors, has 5 different growth factors, as well as our fulvic minerals. Yes?
And also, as you guys see in that little package right there, it comes with a xenoblock and a slip gel number 4, which is a must for the microneedling and other stuff. But, I'm sorry.
I was going to see who used, anybody use slip gel?
Oh, yeah.
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 But the elixir you apply during and send the rollerball.
So instead of like a PRP.
Correct.
And that's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different,
So that's 5 patients.
5 patients.
Yeah, so you use during, send your client home with one roller
Yeah,
and they use it until it's gone,
yeah.
couple times a day, 3 times a day.
And yeah, it's only 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's fabulous. You guys love it.
So most companies are like a 0.25. That's a 5 ml.
It lasts quite
It's
a
a lot
few
of
days.
fun.
Yeah.
This is a before and after, 1 week after, you can kind of see that does. Microreading the protocol, you guys know more about than I do probably. Ready to start creating changes. Oh, these are a few of our, oh, look at this. Get that, we get a bonus. All orders placed today over $500 will receive pumpkin enzyme mask, which is spicy.
My favorite.
Cooling mask, and our AM/PM, that's our high hyaluronic acid Vitamask. And that's a nice little preview there.
So that's very nice.
And thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I meant to clear that with you.
Yeah, that's
Is there an enzyme for home use for,
Like an enzyme cream or like a topical for enzyme?
like a mask for, at home use?
It's on the list. There's a long list of things that I can make. That's why I have the pharmacies to make stuff. But I would like to do that eventually. Yes, actually.
But the AHA is like an enzyme.
Yeah, I like AHAs better than enzymes. Some people like enzymes, like the pine enzyme.
So if someone had hyperpigmentation to treat at home, they.
I don't know if I would treat hyperpigmentation with enzymes. I treat it with AHAs first.
With the
Do you treat
AHA.
it? You don't treat it with hyperpigmentation.
No, I
Just
just,
give it enzymes. Enzymes have a nice softening effect.
Yeah,
But
that's
I think
You want
AHAs are
something.
more.
yeah,
general. She wants a general.
It's on the list of things.
I mean,
The cranberry is
I love it,
amazing on pigment.
yeah, and I love that in the treatment room, but,
For take home.
take home.
Yeah.
It's I thought about it. It may happen.
If we're not too worn out, the 5D slide went a little bit quick. Can you go back to that
Yes,
one?
absolutely. Not worn out. How you guys doing, by the way? You all good? 5D? 5D Nutripeels, that's the one? Yes. Do you want to have questions about it?
Yeah, just when you say the 5D technology.
The 5D technology, 5D stands for 5 dimensions.
Okay.
So you get multi-fruit acids. You get biogenic ingredients. Biogenic, to me, it's kind of a word I made up, although these days there's people are using it a lot. But I always wanted to distinguish natural, which is like anything that's in nature, I suppose. I don't even know what natural means. That's a silly word to me. From something that's in the skin. When I'm looking to formulate a product, I look to the skin to see what is in the skin that's doing the magic. So if you look at all of our ingredients, you'll see that they're all analogous to or mimics of things that are already in the skin. Niacin, vitamin C, hyaluronic acid, all of these beta-glucans, all of these are already in the skin. So biogenic ingredients in this product are sodium PCA, sodium lactate, hyaluronic acid. It's not just a peel, you're also getting lactates and PCA and hyaluronic acid. You're also getting, that's 1D. You're also getting 12 different amino acids. So that's 2D. You're also getting vitamins, niacin, vitamin C. So that's 3D. You're also getting a full spectrum of alpha hydroxy acids, glycolic, lactic, malic, citric, tartaric. That's 4D. And then 5D is the fulvic minerals, the ionic minerals. So you're not just getting a peeling agent. You're getting 5 dimensions of skin health. And that's why we call it 5D. So why just get a peeling agent when you have an opportunity to put sodium lactate, sodium PCA, hyaluronic acid, minerals, niacin, vitamin C, all the aminos, in addition to the peeling agent, right?
Eating it.
Yes, you're giving it all these other nutrients to help improve not only the peel, but improve the skin health in general. What do you think? How you guys doing?
Good.
TMI?
Mm-mm.
Good? Are you better? Are you better at your craft? That's what we want. Thank you. Was there people on there?
Yeah, ask them if they have any questions.
Any questions out there in internet land?